everybody. Welcome to this week's edition of MSP Business School. My name is Brian Doyle, and with me, as always, I've got Robb Rogers and Tim McNeil, my co-hosts in crime, coming to you from OSR Manage. How you guys doing today?
Doing well. Brian, I like the new setup back there.
Yeah.
Well, we're trying to shake things up here. I don't know if I like it yet, but we're working. We're working.
The black light.
Cool. I love the blue.
Black light look is it's very high school.
Need a couple of Bob Marley posters back there,
and a little Rasta hat, and I'll be good to go.
Vodka bottles with a highlighter
and
in
you're
it.
back in college.
And I'm not I can get my cigars and smoke that, right?
That's right.
Matter of fact, we were all on a show yesterday, or in a session yesterday, and I don't know if you guys happen to notice it. There was a gentleman sitting outside smoking on the back porch while the town hall was going on. I think I even saw a bud hitting his lips a couple times.
Yeah,
hey,
it's funny.
We encourage you to do that here during MSP Business School from your own private lair, so no problem.
Yeah, that was funny. I couldn't stop watching that guy.
I was enjoying it too.
Yeah.
But anyhow, what we're really here to talk about today, believe it or not, it's not my cavern or my lair I live in here, but what we're really here to talk about today is a little bit about the sales recruiting process and why so many MSPs struggle at it and why they don't have success on the other side. So, with that being said, maybe Tim, you want to open this one up for discussion?
Yeah. So prior to me coming into the MSP space, in I guess September of 2009, I was a recruiter for four years before then, and it just kind of I was good at that when I was in that industry. Left it when the recession hit, and there were some definite takeaways that I saw from there that we've been able to translate over time that we have seen successful in the MSP space. And that in conjunction with, look, most people that listen to this podcast, they probably know that we were a lead gen company for a while. A big reason we were able to scale our lead gen was because we had so many MSP owners come to us and say, I've had 2, 3, 4 salespeople and they all failed. Well, when you dig a little bit deeper, it turns out they didn't really know how to qualify them. They didn't really know what they were looking for. And more times than not, they probably hired somebody that they related to, which didn't always mean that they were going to be good at sales. So, just through a lot of trial and error over the years, we've kind of come up with we have found that having a 4 to 5 step interview process during the recruiting phase is critical. And there's a lot that goes into it, and we can talk more about it. But the long and the short of it is a salesperson should be able to sell themselves the best, right? They're trying to sell themselves to a company, whatever company that is. It's very easy for a salesperson to sell themselves on 2 or even 3 interviews. It's really hard to keep up that consistency and keep up that story for interviews 4 and 5. And that's kind of the basis of where we come from, is not trying to catch people, but just trying to find the right person that is consistent with their message throughout the entire interview process.
Well, I've always said it. I think I've probably said it a few times on this podcast. The thing that you always worry about with salespeople is the best sale they make is the one to get the job.
Yep.
Right. And how do you make sure that you can get somebody that's consistent? So, with that being said, what's your thoughts then in terms of how the interview structure should be? Like, how do we make sure that we're just not getting amazingly impressed over the course of 2, 3 meetings? And more importantly, I see a lot of MSPs, because they don't have a sales team, they'll bring in an engineer or their director of operations to be the litmus test. Hey, what do you think of them? And these are guys that really just don't understand necessarily what the sales game is and really look at it from a personality piece. So, what do you guys recommend doing when that happens?
I'll jump in there.
Yeah.
I recommend that they do that. However, that interview is a culture interview, and it has nothing to do with the skills, the personality, if they're an influencer or not. When you bring in your team, it's typically the last interview, and it's a culture style. Are the cultures going to fit? That's it. That's the only reason that they should be doing in there or being in there.
Yeah.
So no
Yeah,
evaluation, really just making sure, hey, if this guy came on board, can he fit the mold, or is he going to disrupt the or she disrupt the world?
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, look, a lot of people do one screening call and then they move to an on-site interview. We actually recommend doing two screening calls. One of them with a separate team member to make sure that they kind of pass that test. And then when the initial on-site interview happens, it should be with the owner to make sure that that person does fit the mold, right? It's an overused term, I think, but finding the culture fit is important when it comes to salespeople, especially in the MSP space, because a lot of times that salesperson is the only salesperson in the office. So it's just finding somebody who has a different personality, who's not an engineer, but who will be able to fit into the office with a whole bunch of black and white minded people.
And when you talk a little bit about the phone screenings, I think people don't really know how to conduct a proper phone screening too. I've been on both sides of that process in my lifetime, and it seems like sometimes the phone screening is merely confirmation that the person wants the job, as opposed to really be digging in deep. So, what are your guys? How do you conduct OSR? I got to assume in your recruiting process, it's really you're recruiting salespeople as salesmen, or sales managers with a selling responsibility, right?
Mm-hmm.
How do you conduct your phone screens? What are some of the things that you're looking for
Sure.
to get out of that person in that process?
Yeah, so in the first screening that I do, it's basically a resume check, a head check, and do I like them enough? Tone, cadence, empathy, active listening skills, just on a general basis. So I basically start at the bottom of their resume, college. If there's anything great in college, like they were an athlete, they were in the military, they had some type of special awards, I ask them to talk about that stuff first because it lightens up the mood a little bit. They get to talk about something special to them that they did. Then I go backwards up the resume, and the only thing I really care about is the transition. I look at the times between transitions and the reasons that they give me for transitioning. So it's kind of a gray area, but you don't want more than 2 jobs in 5 years. You don't want a consistent 2-year hop, 2-year hop, 2-year hop all through their career. Those are the kinds of things that I'm looking for. Anything that turns me off in my gut, I'm out, right? So they badmouth the previous owner. They do something that it spins negatively. If they spin negatively with me, they're going to spin negatively with a prospect. So this interview is a prospect, right? They're trying to sell me a proposal. And if they can't do that and uplift me, then that's the first thing they're out for me.
And then one other thing that we recommend for whether we're doing it or whether we're talking to somebody who's hiring a salesperson, if you're doing an interview of really any kind, I think, but especially with salespeople, at the end of each interview, there should be a time where everybody kind of knows it's coming to an end, whether screening call or on site. Always ask the candidate if they have any other questions. And if that salesperson doesn't ask you, well, yeah, what's the next step? If they can't ask for the next step, they're not going to ask for the appointment, and they are certainly not going to ask for the close. So it is unfortunate because there are so many good interviews that we've been on, so many really good interviews, and then it comes right down to it. They don't ask for the next step. And if they don't ask for the next step, they are automatically out. No questions asked.
To me, recruiting is about risk mitigation, right? So if you get to the interview and you're like, okay, this is going pretty good. And then they get to that last part and they don't ask for the business, you're increasing your risk by taking that person on. Okay, so now I got to try and train this up. They don't have that intuitive spot in their gut where they go for it, right? And there's 2 different types of hires. There's the farmer hire, which is a completely different resume than the hunter one, right? For hunters, you're hiring the talent and training the skill. For the farmers, you're hiring the smile, right? You want that person that has that infectious personality, and then you're training the skill. right? Just that person that's that bubbly type of personality. And there's completely two different sets of personality traits that you're looking for there. It's an interesting type of dynamic when you're, going between the two.
Yeah. Well, there's a couple of great takeaways in there, right? One, certainly that part, if they're not asking for the sale in the interview, that's a great litmus test. And for those that are technical leaders listening to our show right now, really put that one in mind, because you might get lulled in by the personality in the conversation, but if they don't ask what the next step is, that really is a red flag in the world of sales. Those of you that are sales managers, you probably instinctively know that as part of your interview. The other thing I found kind of fascinating there, Rob, and it's not something I'd really heard of before, was that bottom-up interview style, right? Certainly agree with the transitions and the reasons behind, right? We want to know why these people left, and we want to get to the real reason. That, was it strictly a quota related, time to go, mutual parting of the ways, right? But I've never thought about kind of reversing it bottom up and really get them talking about themselves personally to kind of loosen the conversation. So that's an interesting tip I think I'm going to take away and try.
Very cool.
Yeah, that does work. It opens up the conversation for sure. In theory, it loosens up the candidate, and it's a little bit easier of a transition into why you're all on the phone.
Yeah.
So now let's kind of bridge the gap from the phone screen to the next interview. You guys interviewed me. I asked you for the sale, said, when am I coming to see you? You said next Thursday. So now it's Thursday. Mm-hmm. What's that interview? What's your opinion on that interview? How should that be conducted? What are you expecting to see out of me? Let's start there. I come across the threshold. What should I be doing for first impression?
Okay.
You as the candidate?
I am the candidate. I need a job, boys.
Yeah. So look, the initial onsite for us should always be with the MSP owner or leadership team, hiring manager, whatever you have there. It is truly a culture fit interview. It lasts anywhere from 45 to 60 minutes, somewhere in there. There's a lot of duplication on conversations or talk tracks that were had during the screening calls, but you're just going into more depth. Talking about past experiences. If we were to talk to your last manager and they were to say one good thing and one bad thing, or one good thing that you did and one thing that you needed improvement on, what would those be? So the thing that you need help on, how have you been able to get better at that? Or, how have you been able to overcome that? Talking about really going into detail about what the MSP space is and having that candidate understand in their core that there's going to be a large amount of prospecting for this role. And that's not for everybody. Right. Yeah. So just making sure that they understand the right expectations. And as a candidate, look, ideally, if you're the candidate going into the MSP space, you've had business to business selling experience before in a long selling cycle process. And you kind of know that inherently you're not going to get as many appointments in the MSP space as other industries. But the reward at the back end is worth it. So it's finding that person who can be, who's willing to be patient and consistent, especially when they're starting up, to kind of get over those hurdles and be successful.
So, with that being said, right? So one of the things I think I'm hearing there too, and one of the things I like that you said, Tim, was, we asked some of the same questions from the screening to that next meeting. I'm sure you've experienced this too, but you also want to see if there's consistency of answer, right? It is not, it's amazing how many people you can catch with their guard down and all of a sudden the quota attainment number changed.
Yeah.
Or the sales revenue changed, and it really changes things. So, I appreciate you pulling that one out, because I think that's a key one for those technical owners too. It's not just about the answer, it's about the consistency in the answer. Because I think we all have scars from sales reps of the past. Mm-hmm. I think we've seen that, sometimes things can get embellished on the sales side. And, if you're not getting the right vibe there and you're not getting the right answers consistently there, forget about, what that might mean in terms of, the person's actually personality makeup and ethics. How are they going to communicate to the team if they can't be consistent in the answers about what the customer needs. They're the guys holding that key and bringing that information to the engineers, right? So
Yeah,
that's another
totally.
critical component to think about.
Totally. Totally.
So now
Yeah.
go from the employer seat, or go ahead, Rob. Do you got more to add? I'm sorry.
Well, you go ahead, Brian. This is more of the employer
Well,
side.
no, I was going to say, let's now kind of play it from the employer seat, right? So candidate comes in, and these are the things that they're expected to do. I'm sure you guys have some sort of litmus test on just what walks in the door.
Yes.
Does a golf shirt and khakis cut it in today's world for interviewing, or do you expect to see a suit? I think that might even be geographic.
It is geographic, but mostly it's business casual on what I see. I would tell a candidate before they come in, don't wear a three-piece suit. This is business casual in our office. Shirt and tie is okay. So I would tell them that that's okay. And it basically what I do is I make a snap judgment when they walk in the door. When they're walking in the door, would I be turned off as a prospect, or am I okay? Right? Heavy cologne, bad. Right? Slouching around, unironed shirts, just all the typical things that would turn you off as a business owner is going to turn off your prospects. So, those kind of things have to be, looked at. It's not the end all be all for me, but it's definitely something that, has to be looked at on my
side. To fit upon that concept of, if your first gut instinct is, I wouldn't buy from this guy, I wouldn't hire that guy either, because you are buying that guy, right?
Exactly. Yeah. If you can't buy him or her, then why would somebody else?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's all about risk mitigation for me. One of the questions that Timmy and I like to do, and this is always a good one for me. You remember earlier when I said, when you're hiring a hunter, you want to hire the talent and train the skill. And what do I mean by that? You want to know that they can handle objections without freaking out, right? When they get in front of a prospect, it's not just going to tell about the services and walk out the door. When the prospect has an objection, are they going to be able to handle it off the cuff, right? Have that quick wit and be able to handle their situation. So what we do is about 3/4 the way through the interview, we ask what we call a bloody nose question. And I just did this question again today. You kind of build them up a little bit. You say, wow, you have a real storied career. You talk about how great their resume is and how they had great success at this one example, and how great. And then you kind of pause, and the way we always do it is we say, but I just don't think that you're going to be a good fit here because of this. And then you stop, and you want to see what they're going to say. A true hunter is going to say, hey, I completely understand where you're coming from, but this is the reason why you're wrong. Somebody who's not good at sales will say something like, well, tell me about your training class. How do you guys do your training? A hunter will handle the objection naturally. And I'll give you a quick example of what happened today. We were interviewing a gentleman, and great candidate, right? Just captain of the football team, captain of this, just, fantastic. Halfway through, like 3/4 the way through the interview, I noticed that he's been in sales for about 15 years. And so I found my bloody nose question, and I said, you have a storied career. You were a captain of this. You're fantastic and everything. But I've noticed that you've never been promoted. Why not? And it's an awkward question, right? And it's uncomfortable. And it's not cool, right? But what it did was he paused, he took a breath, and he's like, I can understand the question. I hear where you're coming from, but this is why you're wrong. And then he went through his resume and he said, you can see down here, I was promoted this time when I was there for 7 years. And he didn't miss a beat. He went through it. He handled it. That's a true hunter right there. That's the guy. That's my thing. That's my one way to find the talent.
All right. Well, we only got a couple minutes left, guys. So is there any other points that you really want to, the audience to understand about, about the hiring process? Maybe there's some red flags you want to maybe share, things that you should instantly walk away from. I mean, we've touched upon a couple of them, but are there any other real big red flags that you guys have experienced in interviews that make you say, this person's not going to make it with us?
I think so. For me, it's less about the red flags. We feel like so I'll take it from two aspects. I'll take it from how we do it and what we've seen MSPs do it. Red flags for us, we feel like we lessen those red flags by how many stages that we have. And one of the things that we do to really flush out those red flags is after that initial interview, we do a DISC profile. And then we follow that up with a DISC profile interview or insert personality profile here. Right. It's just really important, whether it's DISC, whether it's something else, that you do some sort of profile on a salesperson to understand. You can't really beat those, right? And there's not really a wrong answer. It's not a pass fail, but there are going to be things that come up in that personality profile, specifically a DISC is what we always use, it'll kind of screen, is this person a hunter or are they a farmer? And you've really got to read through it. It's brutal. It's about 50 pages. It's brutal, but there's some really good stuff in there. And then that next interview, that next on-site interview, is talking about the red flags that come up, whether it's conversations or talk tracks that had happened in the first couple interviews, and or mixed in with things that could be red flags that specifically a DISC profile would point out. Right? Are they a high D, high I? At the end of the day, people can be successful if they're not a high D, high I. However, there are certain traits and certain things as you look through a DISC that can be very strong indicators that, hey, maybe this person isn't really cut out for cold calling. So that's where we like to catch a lot of our red flags, and I would recommend anybody does that. Anybody.
Good stuff. How about you, Rob? Any thoughts you got?
So Timmy handled the employee side. I'll handle the ownership side. Don't skimp your process because you like the guy or the girl, right? You had a great interview. You guys clicked. So you're not going to check his resume. You're not going to do the background checks and the resume checks and go through your complete process. You have a process for a reason. Anybody can come in there and do a fantastic one-time interview, right? The one-hit wonder. Nobody can consistently do it for 5 different interviews. Don't not do your process because you got a good feeling. That's the time that you don't do it, and you'll mitigate your risk.
Makes sense.
Yep.
Makes sense. So we are out of time. Rob, you want to take us home?
Sure. Thank you, Brian, for having us on the show today.
I know. I felt like I was just the interviewer.
Yeah, it's
today.
right?
And for everybody who's watching, please join us on mspbusinessschool.com or anywhere that you get your podcast. And I thank you, gentlemen, for having a fantastic conversation. And I got to look at the blue light behind you the whole time.
You'll see it again,
awesome.
I'm sure.
It was awesome.
All right, guys.
All right.
We'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Okay.
All right. Thank you.